Welcome to episode number 40 of Halfway There. This is the show where we have honest conversations with ordinary Christians about today's Christian experience. My name is Eric Nevins. Thank you for joining us. You've got a lot of options out there, and that you downloaded Halfway There. I am just extremely grateful for that. I want to let you know you can get show notes for this and every episode of Halfway There at halfwaytherepodcast.com. If you go there, it'll take you to my page, and then you can scroll down just a little bit. You'll find all the most recent episodes, and if you're looking for one older than that, go into the archive. Everything is right there. This is an interesting episode, and so the last couple weeks we've had two people who were involved in really health and physical fitness in a way that I think is interesting. And, you know, I'll be honest with you, maybe I'm finding it challenging because I'm at a place where I really need to take my physical fitness a little more seriously. I sit at a desk all day, and I have a mouthful of sweet teeth, I like to say. So I've got a little sugar thing that I love to do, which probably isn't good for me. Yeah, can I get an amen? But the physical thing is really important to the spiritual life. And I've really been impressed by that over the last couple of weeks. We talked to Jill May 2 weeks ago and Tim Voss last week. And this week I have for you somebody who I was privileged to meet. I took a trip back to my hometown of Des Moines, Iowa, and went to church and sat behind this guy. We struck up a conversation. And I was just really impressed by some of the things that he's doing and the way he's living out a calling to wellness. And I think you will enjoy hearing his story, certainly everything that God has done for him, but then also just some of the ways that he's trying to impact the world, that God has called him to impact the world, ways to give of himself and his expertise. It's pretty cool. It's really cool, actually. So I'm excited to share with you my conversation with Joe O'Toole. Hey, Joe, thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, not a problem.
I'm really glad to have you here, and you're doing some interesting things, which I think will be fun to talk about and hear about. Why don't you just give us a little rundown of who you are and what you're doing, where God has you right now, and then we'll go back and kind of see what events led up to this.
Yeah, definitely. So currently in life, I am a chiropractor working in the Des Moines area. And we have 3 clinic locations right now that we've started, and with that we're really working on some unique aspects with that we are working on transitioning to a nonprofit with our clinics, so that we can help fund a couple of different areas that we see are both on our hearts, but then also on God's hearts with helping serve those who are the most vulnerable in our society.
Yeah, that is really cool, and I want to hear all about that. But let's go back and kind of find out what led up to that particular decision, okay?
Yeah, definitely.
So, if I remember right, you grew up in a pretty big family.
Yeah, there were 9 kids in my family, and I guess big family is relative because my parents came from 16 and 14 each. So,
right.
So 8 boys and 1 girl, I guess makes a big family in most cases.
Yeah. So was your family a Christian family? This was sort of in eastern Iowa, is that right?
Yeah, western Iowa, actually.
Oh, western Iowa,
okay.
Okay.
Grew up in a small town in western Iowa. And when I was, right after I was born, my parents trusted Christ. And so they both grew up in the Catholic faith, and both very religious, but didn't really have a relationship with God. And so really my story of being introduced to a relationship with God started with them.
Yeah,
so
well,
if you want, I can share their story too.
Yeah, well, I'd love to hear a little bit of that, and then how that goes into your story.
Yeah, so my dad, faithful Catholic boy, went to Catholic high school, was an altar boy in the Catholic Church, and just did all the good things that he was supposed to do. And then when he went off to college, one of his best friends in college was actually drafted by the Dallas Cowboys. And so the night that he got drafted, they went out to party and celebrate. And they spent a little too much time partying. And so it was a Saturday night. Then Sunday morning, they decided on their way back to their dorms to just stop at Mass because it'd be better than waking up in a couple hours to go later. And so when they were there, they were had a little too much to drink, and so they were kind of rowdy. And the way Dad tells it is this older lady in front of them turned around and she was like, you guys don't deserve to be here in church. And so at that point, I guess it was a wake up call to him, and he said, yeah, I guess I don't deserve to be here. And he said that he made a commitment with God that until he got his life right, he wasn't going to be back in church. So then he literally didn't go back to church until several years later. A man was going door to door who was a new pastor in town, and just knocked on my parents' door and started to share that it's not about keeping a lot of rules, but a relationship with God is about just asking him to forgive you for rejecting him. And so my dad trusted Christ that night, and then the next night my mom trusted Christ, and that led into the rest of our childhood. Really, a lot of our focus growing up was on that relationship with Christ.
Wow. Did you say that was right after you were born?
Yeah, I think I was about 5 or 6 months old is when
Gotcha.
that occurred.
Very cool. Okay. Well, tell us how that's always great backstory to have. Tell us how that kind of led to your finding the Lord.
Yeah. So my parents, growing up, we were also homeschooled. So we were kind of an odd family, and a lot of people in our community thought we were Mormons because of our size and being homeschooled. But growing up, I guess there was a huge emphasis on being a good person. The kind of the typical church story of, you need to trust Christ, but you need to be a good person also. And really, in a lot of ways, to me, the emphasis was on what ways am I acting? And it was a lot of times really hard for me growing up, just knowing, am I doing this for myself or am I doing this for God? And just a lot of internal conflict with that. But really, I know that when I was 5 years old, I trusted Christ. But again, with the emphasis on being a good person, there were a lot of doubts that I had when I was growing up, and especially into my teen years. Just, did I really mean what I said? And I didn't remember the exact prayer that I prayed. So was it legitimate? And then I just got to a point where I realized, it's not about the words you say or the prayer necessarily. It's more about the belief in your heart and confessing that Jesus is Lord.
Yeah. What led you to that point? Was there an event or something that kind of made you realize all that, or what brought you there?
Really, it was just a lot of sleepless nights, and I was just wrestling so much with, I knew heaven and hell were real, and I didn't want to spend eternity in hell. So just a lot of sleepless nights. And then I don't remember the exact verse that came to mind, but it really just came down to, what? I know that God is my God, and that I want a relationship with him, and I don't need to have these doubts anymore. So it was really just my mind deciding to allow God to reign.
Yeah, you made a choice.
Yes.
Yeah, interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. How old were you then?
I was 13 or 14.
Okay, great.
It was October 26th, but I don't remember which year.
Sure. Which, as you get older, that gets harder to do. So
yeah, I know. I'm feeling old these days.
Everything. Yeah, you're not even as old as me, but I think
I know.
it kind of, things sort of blend together in my mind. Anyway.
Yeah, they do.
So tell us a little more about that. So that was kind of, I guess, early high school-ish, somewhere in there. Tell us about, I guess I want to know, like, what were some of the significant events in your walk as you were growing, and that kind of maybe would have led, that you look back now and led to kind of where you are at this point. How can you see that God's been working with you?
Yeah, definitely. So It's interesting. I had a luncheon today, kind of shared a little bit of my story as well, and just seeing how, even though I didn't really know what was happening at the time, God was just leading in so many ways, and using a lot of random life events to prepare for where we are today.
Yeah.
And so when I was in 7th grade, I went on a church planting tour of the Southwest U.S. with my dad and 2 older brothers. And so we went through Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, and just saw the need for Bible-believing, gospel-preaching churches. And so it was always on my heart to want to get into church planting ever since that time. And then going through high school and then getting out of high school and into college, I didn't quite know what I wanted to do with my life. And so I stayed at home and worked for a year, but still had a draw towards full-time ministry. And so I through a series of events, I knew God wanted me to be a chiropractor, but still wanted to pursue full-time ministry with that.
Yeah. Wait. How did you know that?
How did I know that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good question. That's actually going to be a longer story.
That's okay.
I'll try to shorten it. I've always had an interest in the human body and how it was designed and how it functions ever since I was a little kid. And so I actually started my undergrad to teach special ed and to coach football. And through a conversation with my mom, kind of redirected that, that's not what I'm going to spend my whole life doing. And so I started looking at careers where you could study how the human body works. And as I was looking, I started shadowing a lot of chiropractors and realized that there's a huge need and ability to not only help people with their physical health, but then also as they're coming to be helped physically, that you can introduce them to their greatest need, and that's a relationship with Jesus. So that's kind of the shortened version of it, and it was really just coming to a point where I was just I knew that's where he wanted me, but then also I've learned that just because that's what God wanted out of my career doesn't mean that's who I am.
Yeah, interesting. So he kind of called you, because we talked about this a little bit. You do seem to have a fascination with kind of how God has created the human body and those kinds of things, which I'm sure comes from your study as much as anything. But that's definitely a passion of yours.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and just being able to engage in the science realm and realize that there's not a dichotomy between our relationship with the Creator God and what science is telling us.
Right. Yeah, I think we get hung up sometimes, if I can use the royal we like that. But so in the past, let me put it that way, the church has sometimes gotten derailed by having to have very specific answers instead of just accepting that science will lead us to who God is and how he's made us, will lead us to worship. Yes. Instead of just trying to have very, very specific answers, we should try to find God.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so interesting. My first year of chiropractic school, one of the first classes that we took was embryology. And I had a friend who was an atheist going into the class. And as I would engage with him and talk, it was always the question of, I've had all these science classes and all the experts tell me that there is no God. So how can you tell me that there is, and why should I trust you? And it really came as we went through that embryology class and how the human being develops from conception all the way to birth, that by the end of the class, my friend just said, I don't know if the God you're telling me is the God, but there is no way this happened by chance. And I have to believe that there is a God.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so interesting. And I've always had that same view, but I grew up in a Christian house too, but
sure. Yeah.
But yeah, definitely, if people will study that, that's interesting. So he's kind of went on his own journey because of that class.
Yeah. And really science has led him to know that there's more in life than just what meets the eye. And so, yeah, he's trusted Christ and he has a relationship with him.
Yeah, very cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. When God uses you in those kinds of ways, in the things that you're passionate about and that that He's called you to, that's a pretty good confirmation that He's in what you're doing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It really is. And as I've gone through life, I've really discovered that there can be a very specific calling by God, but a lot of times we can just find in Scripture what God calls us to do. And in every single area of our life, that's what we're called to do. So whether it's I'm a chiropractor and I'm living this way according to the teachings from Jesus Christ, as a chiropractor or as a father or as an elder in my church or as a coach on the football team, like no matter where I am, that's what God has called me to do.
Right.
And I think too many Christians a lot of times get hung up on I'm searching for God's will, so I'm not going to do anything until I find His will.
Yeah.
Instead of moving forward and letting Him work out His will as they're walking through their life.
I'm trying to remember who said it. I want to say it was Augustine, but he said, love God and do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Just love Him, and that'll guide you out of immorality, right? And then,
sure.
And then love God, and then just do whatever else you feel like you need to do, and He'll guide you. That shows a level of trust, in Him.
Yeah, and even Psalm 37 talks to that, where He will give us the desires of our heart as long as the desires of our heart are for Him.
Yeah, right. No, very cool. Okay, well, so that was definitely an interesting event. Take us through. So I don't know when that was, how long you've been out, but take us through. Were there any other significant events that kind of formed your faith between that and where you are now? Because I'm guessing that you mentioned you took your practice into a nonprofit, which you don't have to do.
Sure. Yeah.
But you didn't do that just out of the blue. So there's something that kind of has been leading you to that for a while, I'm guessing. And I wonder what that is.
Yeah, and part of that, I definitely have to credit my parents with that, and I've tried to figure out what the magic formula is for being a parent, but I'm still working on that. So
yeah, well, if you
figure that out, I'll let you know.
Great, thank you. That's what I was going to ask.
Yeah. But really, my parents really instilled in us a heart for caring for others, and really in all of us, and I see that in my siblings. My oldest brother works part-time as a youth pastor, and he's adopted a couple of kids and they had done foster care for several years before they adopted these two children. And my other older brother lives in South Africa, and he started 2 orphanages, and he's working now directly with a lot of high-risk youth. And then my sister, they're just starting to go foster children, and my wife and I are planning on adopting. My brother, most of my family, that's our desire, is just to care for those who need care. And so that's really where it started. Was just my parents really instilling in that when we were young. And I remember even a lot of times growing up, there were weeks during the summer where we'd have family friends or kids from the youth group that were having some difficulties in life that would just come live with us for 2 weeks, 4 weeks, something like that.
Yeah.
And we really just accepted them into our family.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. So that was something that just came from your parents living it out.
Yeah. Yep. And just living the teachings of Jesus, which so many Christians fail to do. But so yeah, it started with that, and then continuing on, I guess, in between my undergrad work and my doctorate, my wife and I lived in China for a year, and so we were exposed to a lot of need, and we worked primarily with college students there, and so when we were there, there's a huge stigma for college students there. It's if any of them got pregnant, it was just immediate. Get rid of this child, and so we were exposed a lot to that when we were working with college students there, and so that's also been a big thing on our heart. So so as we got into practice and as God was just continuing to bless us and we're just captured with this vision that he has for where we're going to go with our clinics. My brother who graduated a couple years after me, and he's a chiropractor as well. We work together and we were talking and we have this vision that we're going to start 60 clinics and we have the exact plan and how we're going to do it and when it's going to happen and everything. But as we were talking through that, we just felt greedy that, God's blessing us this way and the things are falling into place for this. But when is too much? And when are we focusing on ourselves and this is about us? And then it was just a series of events that led to realizing, why we don't need to be working for ourselves. We can be working for others by turning into a nonprofit and really letting God use us this way.
Yeah, that's great. Interesting. There's an interesting dynamic in the kingdom where at a certain point you don't have to worry, right? Jesus always says, don't worry about what you'll eat tomorrow or the clothes you'll wear, which sounds ridiculous, right? Especially if you have kids.
Right.
But his point is that you God knows what you need and he will give you even before you ask, right?
Oh, that is so true. And having gone through, if anybody has ever started a business and especially coming fresh out of school, it's financially, it's not very rewarding off the bat. It's
right.
Tough work. And you're really putting yourself at the mercy of God. And I mean, I remember even just a year ago for us, my wife and I were reflecting on this today. A year ago, she broke her foot. We had 2 toilets in our house that started leaking. Our furnace went out. My truck broke down, and we found out we were pregnant all in a matter of 2 weeks.
Wow.
And we're like, we're going to be sunk with this, but God got us through it. I mean, in just miraculous ways.
Well, tell us those stories. How did you do
that? Yeah. So with the toilet, my father-in-law and I were able to fix those ourselves. My truck ended up only being like $200 worth of repairs. The furnace, we had connections with a guy who had a new furnace that had been sitting in a warehouse for 5 years and gave it to us for really, really cheap and didn't charge us for his time to install it. And I mean, just all these things God brought together that when we first, it's like, okay, add another thing to the pile. We're just going to get buried. And God just revealed himself in tremendous ways.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, I'm curious about this. Have you ever had a time when God felt distant or far away or absent?
That's a good question. I don't really think so. And yeah, not really, because just where we've lived our life and the way we've lived it, the only times that he feels distant are when I wander away from him. And primarily when I wander away from the ways to relate with him. And so primarily when I'm not spending time in his word and in praying with him.
Yeah.
So those are really, but though it's very, very seldom. And I can't say that I've had a long period of time.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, that's a common part of the spiritual journey. So that's why I asked that question.
Sure.
A lot of times, this is my part of what I'm doing is, a lot of times the older writers will call that the dark night of the soul. And evangelicals, we don't talk about that, or we don't use that language very, very well.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a common piece, but not, doesn't happen to everybody. It doesn't happen. So it's good.
Sure. Well, I have gone through periods of time where I've been very confused and conflicted. But even in those times, I've always felt God is near.
Yeah.
And the confusing thing for me has been God is calling me to do something, or I just feel so compelled that this is what I need to do. And the logical side of me can't figure out why. But I just know. And so most recently, about a year ago, I was serving as an elder at our church, and I knew that God was calling me away from being an elder, and that was something that I'd always wanted in my life, was to be in full-time ministry. And it just never entered my mind that he would call me away from that. But I just knew, okay, you know what, God is calling me away, and I'm going to have to faithfully take that step. And so when I did, after several months of conflict internally, I had so much peace, and it was literally within a week's time that everything started to happen with the nonprofit, and God started to bring all the pieces together to make that even a vision in our mind.
Wow, that's interesting. So you look back and see that God was kind of preparing you for that, and to kind of get these things rolling with the business. Yeah.
Yeah. And really, we were dragging our feet, even though we didn't know, because we had this, God wants me to be an elder in my mind. And that was really what was holding me back from the step he wanted me to take on my journey.
Yeah. Yeah. So you had to even trust him to give up something that you had thought of yourself as being, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that is a lofty thing to strive for, but it's not for everybody, and God didn't want it for me.
Yeah. Interesting. Wow. Cool. Okay. Well, tell us a little more about you. I think you gave us a story about how you came up with the idea to do this, but I'd like to hear more about your heart for, uh, we could say the underprivileged, right, or the under noticed.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us a little bit about that, and what your plans are to do with, um, with a nonprofit, and how you want to help.
Yeah, exactly. So really, we've identified four, and there's definitely more. In fact, one guy after my talk this afternoon came up and mentioned one, and it's like, yeah, that's a fifth segment of our society that's really taken advantage of. And so he mentioned, especially adults or any individual with mental or physical disabilities.
Sure.
But but um, so our list isn't exhaustive, but this is what's really on our hearts in a big way. And so the four main individuals that we see that are the most taken advantage of in our society is first the unborn and their mothers. That it is, the unborn have become a political bargaining chip, and they are used to manipulate people. And so are their mothers. And so we see that there is a very real fight that needs to be done for these victims of mass slaughter. And so there's.
So I want to chime in on that, because I think that's true, and it's interesting that it's on both sides of the aisle, right?
Yes.
There, whether you're pro-life or pro-choice, both of them are using really what are innocent people, or people who are in a hard situation, as their political prop.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Which is unjust.
Exactly, it very much is. And so that's where we want to both engage in that fight, and then help support others who are engaging in that. So we're working with crisis pregnancy centers here in the Des Moines area, and we want to expand that to help give mothers who are in a difficult situation the opportunity to care for this life that is unborn, and to help support them that way.
Yeah. What kind of things do they do? I mean, if you could get specific.
Yeah, Dr. Amanda is our main point person in working with them, but they do a lot of ultrasounds, counseling, advice, pointing them in the direction of medical providers that can care for them. And one of the nurses that's on staff there is a friend of ours that goes to church with us, and they're able to sit there and just help work through a lot of the life changes that are happening because of this baby.
Yeah, so practical, needed care that they otherwise wouldn't get, probably.
Exactly. And then giving them options to get care, not only for their physical health, but then also for the health of their baby and even their mental health. There's a huge toll that's placed on these young girls and women.
Right. Okay. So what's the next one?
Yep. So helping fight for the life of the unborn and their mothers. The second is orphans, and that's something, as I've shared my story, you've heard is been really a big part in our lives. And my wife and I are planning on adopting a little girl from China, and we had our third child, a little girl, about 7 months ago, and when we were first holding her, there was just it really hit us that there's a little baby in China right now who has never been held by loving arms. And there are babies all over the world that have never been held by somebody who loves them. And as we were sitting there looking at our daughter and how innocent and joyful she was, it just broke us. And so we want to help to help write scholarships and to help fund bringing parents and children together for the first time. And so that would be the second of the most vulnerable in our society. And another big thing with that is then that kind of plays into the third, is especially children, but really there's a huge dark world that is there, but most of us don't even know about, and that's sex trafficking and sex slavery. And a lot of orphans especially are the most vulnerable for that. And there are some amazing organizations out there that are doing work to free children and to free men and women from the sex trade.
Yeah.
So
that's great. I don't know if you had a chance to listen to it. I can't remember if I recommended it to you or not, but there was a guy that I interviewed, and I can get the exact number, but his name is Jeff Brodsky. He works with an organization that he started called Joy International.
Okay.
And they do exactly that. They go and work with, they go and rescue girls from all over the world. He's gone undercover in brothels and things.
Okay.
But anyway,
I'll have to look into that.
Check that out, because I think you'll like it. But if you're looking for a great organization, there's one for you.
Yeah, definitely.
He's here in Colorado. But but yeah, so through him, I've learned a little bit about this, and I agree with you. It's so unbelievable, the number of people and and just the horrific things that happen to these girls is just amazing.
Right. Well, and my wife was at a conference this last fall, and then I watched a video that they showed there, and it was Operation Underground Railroad, if you've heard of them at all. But they're an organization that similar. They go in around the world and help break up these sex trafficking rings. And they showed a video from 60 Minutes where they actually were on this sting, and they went into this room that was just filled with little girls and little boys that were just waiting for men and women to come in and do whatever they wanted. And it was just talk about heartbreak.
Yeah.
Especially when you have a couple little kids of your own sitting right there that, I mean, you can just, there's a lot of righteous anger with that.
Right. No kidding.
And so we want to be able to help organizations like Joy International and Operation Underground Railroad and these kind of organizations that are freeing children from that atrocity.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the thing they need most. I asked him this. So what do you need? And he said, money. He goes, I could rescue so many more girls if I had money. So that is a huge gift. And I think, the kind of thing that you're doing, you obviously have a viable business and a great, you're providing a service and you're helping people in a holistic way, and you're passionate about that. But then you can also to take the proceeds and go and fund some of this stuff. Dude, I have great respect for that. That's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, It's so fun. It's so rewarding, and every day I get to go into work and know this is why I'm working.
Yeah.
And it's not about making a paycheck or anything, but it's every single person that I can help with their physical health means that somebody else can be helped get the care that they need.
Right. It's like a win-win.
It is.
What was that fourth? Because I think we covered 3. What was the fourth group?
Yeah, so the fourth group is really the poor or those who are underserved with their physical medical needs. And so working on funding medical missions teams, and actually just talked with a pastor today who lives in more of the urban area of Des Moines, and there's a lot of refugees and immigrants in his neighborhood, and setting up an outreach clinic in their church where they can invite the poor in their neighborhoods to come in and get the physical care that they need, and then working with the church to introduce them to their need for a relationship with Jesus.
Yeah.
So that would be the fourth is just the poor. A lot of times they're taken advantage of. Again, similar to the unborn. It's a political. They're held hostage in politics.
Right. So that's that. You say that's medical care for poor people.
Yeah.
Basically, I love that because you're right, and there's got to be ways. And without getting too political, we kind of brought that up, but I just feel like we have to find some political ways to make it possible for doctors to give away their time, to these people. I mean, they can do it. I mean, not everybody has to do what you've done, which, like I said, is admirable. But to make that advantageous for the doctor to do it, there's got to be ways to do that. And especially here,
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that's a huge thing. Is too often we rely on politics as the answer, and we rely on the government as the answer. And I had a long conversation with a patient this week who's a medical compliance lawyer, and just in that conversation, the government can't truly care for people. Like only people can care for people. Only I can care for my neighbor. I can't sit back and expect, well, we have all these government programs, and so it's going to help somebody. Yeah, it will help them, but it's not giving them the care they need.
Right.
And so I need to be the one who actually is the hands and feet of Jesus, because I'm the one who knows what's going on in my neighbor's life, in my patient's life, in the relational side of things. I can find out where do they need care.
Right. And what the government does may help them now. It may not help them 5 years from now.
Yeah.
And so that is a real issue. If you want people to become self-sufficient and more free, even, I would say,
yes.
They need that. So yeah, I love that you're doing that. So where do you want to be with all of this in 5 years?
Boy, good question. We haven't quite nailed down the timeline yet, but
sure. Well, give us an idea. Just give us a little bit of your vision. A few years out, 5 or 10 years.
Yep. So we are looking. So originally, before we even had the idea for the foundation and the nonprofit, and there's still a lot of legal work that needs to be done with that, because anytime you try to set something up that is not giving more money to the government, they always want their money, which
right.
Again, they deserve. Give to Caesar what is Caesar's, but it's just there's a lot of legal things on that we're working through with red tape, but so that would be one thing is working through. There's a new type of nonprofit that is being considered in the state of Iowa, and it's called a benefits corporation, and so basically you can still operate for profit, but then you're not allowed to keep your profits at all. You have to give them all away. So you wouldn't be taxed like a for-profit business would be. So we're working with some of the state legislature on that side of things to be able to allow better funding, I guess.
Yeah. So what do you, as the doctor, then do you take a salary?
Yeah.
Is that how that works?
Yep. So we'll pay all of the doctors in our clinics a competitive salary. It's because they're caring for people, and so we want them
Sure.
to be cared for as well. And so we take care of those on our team. But then, then anything above our base salaries really goes into funding these initiatives.
Gotcha. So interesting. So I love this. You're actually trying to change the law in a way that makes it better for people, or makes it more possible to do more good in the world.
Yes.
Rather than restricting or some of the ways that Christians have in the last, let's say, 30 or 40 years, that's going to make a big difference in Iowa if you can do it.
Yeah, it will. And again, we've got God's just working in random people's lives to help make it a possibility. So it's really cool to see different people come together that I would have never pictured coming together across all walks of life, all political spectrums, all ideologies. And just to see that God is able to use people, whether they know they're being used or not.
Yeah, very cool.
So
okay,
yeah, so
go ahead.
So that's kind of one of the things in the next year or two that we're really working on, and then we're still in the early stages of we don't have a lot of financial ability yet, as we're still just a couple of clinics right now, but I would say in 5 years we will probably have about 5 to 10 clinics open.
Awesome. And you're shooting for 60?
Yep. Well, that's what it was before we decided to go nonprofit. Now we're not stopping at that.
Oh, awesome.
So
that'll
do. Before it's like, okay, this is when it becomes too greedy and we can turn our attention elsewhere. And now it's like, well, okay, we'll blow past that.
Right.
So really whatever God wants with that. But yeah, 60 is where we really see things really being able to have a major impact.
Yeah. Very cool. So can I ask this question? You don't have to answer if you don't want to.
Sure.
What kind of, when you say impact, that's kind of vague. Like what kind of, do you have a dollar figure you're shooting for to give away or to use?
Not really.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't necessarily have a dollar figure. That's kind of above my pay grade as a business person.
Yeah.
I'm a doctor. I'm not a business person. And so we are working with a guy who is starting to put some of the numbers together that actually understands what he's talking about.
Gotcha.
And so we're in kind of the planning stages with that.
Yeah. Well, I was just curious because I find that motivating, but what I'm interested in is because I know that there's somebody else out there, right, listening to this that maybe has never thought of this idea, and maybe, God, or maybe they sense that God is calling them in a certain direction to do something like this. And it doesn't have to look exactly like what you're doing. It could be something totally different as far as the practice or, the nonprofit or whatever it is. But, I was curious about what that is. So
well, so let me tell you this. So when I say impact, I mean not just the dollar amount that we can give, but we just announced actually today at this luncheon that our new tagline and mission with our clinic is creating a culture of care.
Yeah.
And that's the impact that I'm talking about, that it's not just us doing this, but that it's somebody listening to this. Every single time I have an opportunity to share the message of what we're doing, it helps somebody else catch this vision that, maybe in my own life, how can I show care to somebody? Maybe it's the cliche of helping an old woman cross the street or whatever, but in what areas can I truly, deeply, authentically care for somebody?
Yeah. That's a mission, brother.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It's got me fired up. Trust me. I'm so pumped right now.
I can hear it. I think that is just, like I said earlier, just commendable. And I really love it because I think we're going to have to, as the church is going to have to start thinking of different ways to engage people and to make a difference. And this is one of those ways.
Right.
So,
Unless you start with a heart that truly, first and foremost, loves God, but then truly loves the people that He loves, His
yeah,
creation, you're never going to be able to think of unique ways or to think of something new. It's just because it's always going to be self-centered.
right. Right. Well, so I work at a major financial corporation. I mean, it's $1 trillion company.
Uh-huh.
And
I'd like those finances.
I know, right? But what I've learned from working there is that, when I first started working there, I thought $100,000 was a lot of money. Now it is a lot of money, but I've
Mhm.
seen a lot more than that now, and people who have it. But what that taught me was that the money is never really the issue, right?
Yes. Uh-huh.
It's out there. People have it. It's just the trick is getting them to give it to you for the cause that you have. And so,
Yes.
you have a mission. I don't know. I'm not angling for people to give you money, but if they want to, maybe they should talk to you. But,
Yeah.
but just to say that, hey, it's out there, and that's not the thing that's going to stop us. What's going to stop us is a lack of vision. So,
Mhm.
that's why I just love to hear that you have this vision, and I hope that it inspires somebody to go out and do the same thing.
Uh-huh. Yes, same here. That's all I can ask for is if somebody can hear my passion and vision and not become me. And that's a mistake I've made in the past is, oh, this person's doing this thing, that's really cool, let me try that. But really just finding, how has God impacted me? How has God changed me? And how does God want to use me? Because He loves me. And how can I love somebody else because of that?
Yeah. Oh, perfect. Cool. Well, that is, I think, a great place to just leave it off there. How can people find your clinics and your organization if they'd like to?
Yeah, right now we're in the Des Moines area, and we're going to be opening a clinic in Ames, Iowa, as well. Uh, so they can find us on the internet. Our website still needs to be updated, uh, but our website is lifestreamclinics.com. So Lifestream Clinics with an S.com.
Great. Well, I'll put that in the show notes so that everybody can
Okay.
find it. And if people are in the Des Moines area looking for a chiropractor, they can definitely check that out and know that they're doing good for themselves and for others, which is
Uh-huh.
awesome. So that's a
Uh-huh.
benefit. And then, if they're interested in your mission, then they can find out more or keep tabs on you.
Yeah, and they can definitely email us. Our email is on the website, so feel
Perfect.
free to email. And really, the biggest thing that I would ask for right now is as having served in ministry before and in various ways. When Ephesians 6 talks about a spiritual warfare, it is so true that there's a spiritual warfare going on, that we're not fighting against flesh and blood, even though, again, talking about politics, we focus on the flesh and blood, but there's such a spiritual warfare in this dark world. And the only way to really truly defeat that is through prayer. And right now, with our clinic and everything that's going on in our lives, is probably one of the weakest we'll ever be, just with all the transition that's happening. And so I would just love for people to pray for us, that there would be protection and unity on our team and in our vision.
Yeah, you got it, brother. Well, definitely, I will be praying for you and invite our friends here to pray for you as well.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. We need that more than anything.
Awesome. Thanks. Joe, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. I'm just deeply impressed, brother, about the way that you're using your gifts and to create a practice where you can not only bring, I would say, the shalom of God, right? The peace, the thriving of God into people's lives in a way that sometimes is neglected in the physical realm. And at the same time, creating something where you can go out and do a tremendous amount of good in His name. Good job. That is fantastic. thanks for doing it. Hey, friends, if you want to find out more about Joe, if you happen to be in the Des Moines area, you can always go to one of his clinics. It's lifestreamclinics.com. That's probably the best way to connect with them. There's a contact page, there's a phone number, and you can always just hit Joe up on Facebook too if you really wanted to find out more about what he's doing or find out more about his dream, or maybe you have a way that you want to help. Do that. That would be great. Guys, you can get show notes to every episode. I'll put a link to Livestream Clinic in those show notes. You can get it there. If you liked this episode, please share it with a friend. Let somebody know. If you have a friend or somebody, family member who could benefit from hearing it. Man, just share it with them. I would deeply appreciate it. Until next week, keep the faith.